Good evening and welcome to the October 12th, 2017 meeting of the Kern County Planning Commission, which I will call to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Louie?
Here.
Commissioner Babcock?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia? Here. Commissioner Poole? Commissioner Sprague? Mr. Nations? Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Ms. Oviatt?
Here.
Thank you. Next is item B, Commissioner Member Announcements or Reports. I see that Ms. Poole just arrived, so we recognize that she is with us tonight. I do have an announcement. Tonight will be my last meeting with the Planning Commission. I've been, between the BZA and the Planning Commission, I've been sitting up here, it'll be 23 years total by the end of the year. I've taken a position with a new company that takes me all over California, both southern and northern, running their projects. So it'd be very difficult for me to be here on a consistent basis. So I have enjoyed the 23 years. I hope that I have helped organize Kern County and help the public, but tonight is my last night. Thank you. Okay, item C, approval of the September 28, 2017 minutes. Any?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item D, cases withdrawn or requests for continuances. Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, we have 4 items that are on the agenda for cases withdrawn or requests for continuance. The first case, number 2, CUP 8, map number 7110. The applicant is Candace Coffey. The staff recommendation is continue to October 26, 2017. Case number 3 is SPA number 5, map 203. Zone change case number 20, map 203. The applicant is Patrick Keeley. The staff recommendation is to continue to October 26, 2017. The next case is SPA number 88, map 101, zone change case number 191, map 101. The applicant is Brian Moreno Construction, Inc., by LAV Pinnacle Consulting and Engineering. The recommendation is to continue until October 26, 2017. And the last item is CUP 2, map 131, CUP 2, map 191, CUP 6, map 191. The applicant is the Kern County Planning and Natural Resources Department, and the staff recommendation is to continue until October 26, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Commissioners, looking for action.
I'll move to continue 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Can we get a vote, please?
Four ayes, one absent, motion carries.
Thank you. Next is item E, consent items. It does not look like we have any on the agenda this evening. So we will move to item F, which is public presentations. This portion of the meeting is set aside for persons wishing to desire to approach and talk to the commission on any items that are within our jurisdiction but are not on tonight's agenda. Did anyone like to take advantage of that time? Seeing none, we will move on. Item G, public hearings, number 1. Ms. Oviatt. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You want me to read mine first?
Chairman Babcock, if you could explain for the purposes of the hearing tonight how this will go, I think that would
Okay.
help the public.
Then
Thank
I will
you.
be happy to do that. This will be the process for the hearing on the cannabis item this evening. We are very interested in hearing all sides on the cannabis ordinance issue. However, we need an orderly process. So after a staff presentation, we will open the public hearing. No speaker cards are required. However, please be ready to come to the front podium quickly and say your name slowly and spell your last name. We are going to allow 1 hour for total comments. Each speaker will be allowed 2 minutes, and we will be using a timer, which you'll be able to see. Now, if I have a speaker that will not follow these directions, I've already instructed security after I've asked you nicely to finish up, and if you refuse to leave, you will be escorted out of the chambers. Repeating comments is not necessary. If you have a spokesperson for a group and just want your people to raise their hands or stand to be acknowledged, they agree with your presentation, that would be great. And I will ask each speaker if they are a spokesperson, and once they've completed their 2 minutes, if they have a group that would like to stand and be recognized. But you still only get 2 minutes. There is no clapping or shouting in the chambers. And again, I've instructed security that if I have a person or persons that continues to act not according to the chamber rules, that person will be escorted out as well. Any questions you have will be written down and responded to by staff after closing the public hearing. Be respectful of the time to allow everyone to speak once, and if there is time left, then people can speak again. We will ask the commissioners if they have any questions for the speakers. If not, I will close the public hearing. There will be no more comments taken from the public after that. Staff will be allowed to respond, and then the commissioners will discuss, and only staff, county council will be asked to speak. Director Oviatt, let me go beyond Director Oviatt's presentation. Once I open the public hearing, we are going to take that 1 hour, and whatever time that is, I'm going to write it down, and then I'll tell you when that hour is up. As a reminder, each speaker is limited to 2 minutes, and you can see the timer. Again, say your name slowly and spell your last name for the clerk. Thank you. Ms. Oviatt.
Thank you, Chairman Babcock, members of the commission. I am here tonight with my team. To my right is Craig Murphy, who is the division chief in charge of this project. In the audience, I have Sean Beeler, and I have my translator. I don't know if we're translating, but I have Carlos. And
Oh, we do have our translator? Wasn't aware of that.
He has headphones if there's people who need translation.
Is there anyone in the audience that speaks Spanish and needs a translator? And I'll have the gentleman come down and speak in Spanish as well.
There it goes. Go to the podium, please.
Para todas aquellas personas que necesiten traducción, tenemos equipos en la parte de atrás.
Does anyone need to take advantage of the translator? Please raise your hand.
So Chairman Babcock, we have simultaneous headphones in the back. They can just go see Carlos
Right.
and they will get translation.
Yes, we do have headphones, so, okay.
So,
Carlos,
They have
I
their-
see one guy raising his hands in the back row.
yeah, she has the transmitter in her hand, so
Okay.
she's taken care of. I'm also here tonight with Suzanne Hansen, who is our planner, who has been working on this project, along with representative from Kimley Horn, who prepared the environmental impact report for us. First, I wanted to give you an overview of how cannabis has been handled since Proposition 215. So in 1996, when medicinal cannabis was approved by the voters, what the voters thought they were approving was a small kind of collective. One person who had a medical card, who knew how to grow cannabis, would grow it and then provide it to a few others who also had medical cards, and that collective would then be a nonprofit, and there would not be any profit involved, and they would just be the costs. That is not what developed after a couple of years. What we had was brick and mortar dispensaries, retail operations opened, and they have asserted to us that they have thousands of customers. The county was left, along with the cities, with no state oversight of any of this. There's no licensing, there's no background check, nothing in proposition, except for one setback, 1,000 feet. There were no real requirements. So, for the last 18 years, the county has attempted to manage this new industry. We've had uneven results, and we've had no support from the state and little support from the courts. That is how we have gotten to where we are now, with a mix of legal and illegal. We've banned it, we've allowed it, we've had it overturned, and we have provided in the staff report a complete, detailed chronology and explanation given to us by County Council of what has happened. Which brings us to now. November 8th, 2016, the voters once again voted. While Kern County did not vote to pass this, the rest of California did, and therefore it is law. Proposition 64 now legalizes and changes, it legalizes adult use, but it also changes how medicinal cannabis is managed. State licensing begins January 1st, 2018. As a reminder, adult use is limited to 21 and over. Medicinal is limited to 18 and over with a medical card. The whole collective structure is changed. There is an exemption for 5 or fewer people can be a collective, but they cannot make a profit and they cannot charge. So we are moving from an arena of what I would call no rules or few rules, a self-regulated industry with very, very mixed results for our communities, to a highly structured, Sacramento-regulated industry. So on July 19th, 2016, the Board of Supervisors, after being ordered by the courts to do a full environmental impact report for any ordinance that they wanted to bring forward, made a referral to our department to go ahead and prepare an environmental impact report and to provide 2 comprehensive options. A comprehensive ban, and what would it take to actually implement a ban, and a regulatory proposal. So the proposed project that we looked at in this environmental impact report has these 2 options for unincorporated parts of the county only, and takes into account this uneven implementation that we had with court determinations that some dispensaries were legal and others we've considered illegal. So we've incorporated all of that into these 2 ordinances. I'd like to just take a moment and point to the section of the Planning Commission staff report, which has a lot of information, which actually outlines the state licensing that will be required. There are 3 agencies that will be required, and the agencies, the Bureau of Cannabis Regulation under the Bureau of Consumer Affairs will do all of the licensing for testing, retail operations, and overseeing that. The California Department of Public Health Office of Manufactured Cannabis Safety will be regulating the actual manufacture of edibles, the manufacturing of oils, and the types of processing that goes on. And the California Department of Food and Ag, Cal Cannabis Cultivation Licensing, will license those. There are many, many regulations that they are working their way through, everything from extensive background checks to who can own these who can own what, how often they need to be inspected, public health. One thing that Sacramento does well is overregulate. And for the first time, Kern County is glad that Sacramento is actually entering into the regulatory world for this industry. Many people have commented, why aren't we waiting for the regulations to be finished? We cannot wait for the regulations to be finished. Kern County, because of the situation with our court cases, must have an ordinance in place before January 1st, 2018, when the state begins licensing, and that is why we are here today. So first, I'd like to look at option A, which is a ban. I'd like to note that we have provided to you, as besides the staff report, which is comprehensive, an addendum, which includes more comment letters in our responses, as well as some informational maps, which we'll be discussing. And there are other comment letters that have been provided to you. So under option A, ban, we would repeal all of the prior ordinances, including the current moratorium, and any of the ordinances that are in place now. We would adopt a new ordinance, which you've been provided, and we would ban commercial cannabis activities in the unincorporated areas for both medicinal and adult use. We would reconfirm that personal use of cannabis is not allowed in the public, which is in Proposition 64, but we would reconfirm that. County parks, we would make a referral to amend the lease with the county fair to prohibit cannabis vendors at the county fair. And although you are allowed to have 6 plants for personal use, we would ban cultivation of 6 plants outdoors. So we would require, which we are allowed to do under Proposition 64, that you grow your 6 plants inside. The EIR has one mitigation measure for a ban, and that would be to create and fund a cannabis activity enforcement task force, which we will discuss in a moment. And then we have been undergoing a process of reviewing dispensaries. We started with 22 on the list. We now are at 28 on the list, which were legally established under the 2009 ordinance, which the court reinstated, and were in place before the moratorium. These existing court-determined legal retail medical dispensaries would be allowed to operate for 1 year with a temporary state license for medicinal cannabis only. They would then have to close after that 1 year. However, we have provided legally a hearing process by which they could provide us with financial information that shows that their financial investment in their physical building and the things they've had to do, they have not recouped their investment, and therefore they need another year. Amortization is the process by which we make sure that we are not unduly affecting these businesses, because they are legal non-conforming uses, and we are saying you must go out of business. So we have provided that, but all illegal dispensaries who have not made that determination must close immediately. The fiscal public services impact of a cannabis activity enforcement task force has been put together with consultations with the sheriff, the DA, county council. We have support staff. I did work with all of them on what would it take to have a proactive task force that actually went out and found these operations, because right now we are complaint driven. We wait for someone to call us. The kinds of things this task force might do, for example, is we would coordinate with real estate agents. We would send out mailers. We would let brokers know what the rules are, so that property owners could be adequately informed that they should not even begin leasing or begin opening these. This is a time-intensive. As a reminder for people who, your commission knows this, but the public may not, Kern County is bigger than the state of Massachusetts and bigger than the state of New Jersey. We are a very large county, and is one of our challenges to actually enforce our rules. And so this proactive force would take this level. It would start at start and phase in over the year, about a 4-year period. I do note that we have reviewed the tax and revenue code for cannabis tax that was implemented under Proposition 64, and it actually states in there that the law enforcement money from the $1 billion that's going to be collected, no grants to local counties or cities will be given for law enforcement, fire protection, or any public health and safety if a local jurisdiction bans commercial activities, retail dispensaries, or any portion of that. So this money would have to come from the general fund, and there are no state funds that could be provided for this. Next, we'd like to look at option B, which is to regulate. Staff has reviewed all the ordinances in California. We've looked at Colorado, we've looked at Washington State, so we are familiar with all of the kinds of ordinances that have been implemented. What we were interested in is looking to see what Kern County does. How does this fit with who we are as a community? How can we size this industry to fit with what we already have? So we would repeal all the prior ordinances. We would adopt a new ordinance, which are standards and conditions. We would establish setbacks, indoor cultivation, which would primarily be greenhouses, processing and packaging, independent testing, which there would only be 5 of them, would need to be half a mile from schools, public parks, family daycares, youth centers, libraries, and city limits. The independent testing actually on this PowerPoint has actually moved to a has actually now a site plan and not a CUP, so we have those same setbacks. We have moved cultivation to a conditional use permit, so outdoor cultivation and retail cannabis stores go through a conditional use permit, which your commission is very familiar with. We are starting with 1,500 feet minimum from the uses identified. Please note that the state setback is 600 feet, and the state setback does not include parks, it does not include libraries, and it does not include city limits. So we are actually more restrictive. The ordinance does provide that your commission could determine that a larger setback needs to be provided to prevent exposure for children, teens, or nuisances, and you could conditionally approve or you could deny it. That is, of course, appealable to the Board of Supervisors. Next. Because we did an environmental impact report, we actually had to establish numbers. So we did look at right-sizing this industry. 2 million square feet of indoor cultivation. That is not 2 million square feet of cannabis. That is 2 million square feet of a building that also includes a front office, it includes a lounge, it includes whatever it includes for a business. 500,000 square feet of processing as the industry is moving from actually using the plant to taking the plant and turning it into an oil, which is then put into drinks, it's put into edibles, and it is actually then put into conveyances. So the 500,000 square feet was calibrated for the 2 million square feet. We then had limited outdoor cultivation to 150 acres. The state will only be giving out a license for up to 4 acres. Therefore, we believe 150 acres is an appropriate size. Testing facilities are independent. They cannot be owned by anybody. They are completely independent. They are owned by anyone who owns a cannabis operation. Therefore, 5 independent testing facilities is more than sufficient. 20 transport and distribution. These are the independent transporters and distribution who must pick up the cultivation, for example, samples and take them to testing. And then once they pass the test, they must deliver them to the retail dispensaries. And those people cannot own all of those types of operations. So the state has structured this along the lines of alcohol distribution, where there is checks and balances in the system so that one person cannot own all of these different types of operations, therefore leaving it open to perhaps not following all the rules or somehow bending the rules. And then we have in the staff report our calculations on how we came up with 32 countywide, but there would only be 32 countywide retail operations, no more than 2 per named area on the commercial cannabis designated area map, which we are going to look at right now. So if you go to page 5 and 6 of the staff report, no, you're going to go to the map? Okay. It also explains the logic behind how we got to 32. It is based on the adults, the number of adults we have in Kern County, the percentage of people in Colorado who use adult or medicinal, and what percentage. Running those percentages through our population, we are talking about 56,000 consumers. 56,000 consumers if we had 32 retail operations with 2,000 customers each would be more than sufficient. We right now, with the illegal operations in the city of Bakersfield, the legal in the county and the illegal, we have over 121 retail operations. Based on their calculations, they are supposedly taking care of 1 million customers. That is just not possible. We have looked at the traffic numbers, and it's just not possible. So we do believe that 2,000 customers for each of these operations is a reasonable number. And many of these operations probably only have a few customers. So we have come up with this map out of KernCog. KernCog has divided the county into these regions based on transportation censuses. So we thought this was a good place to start. So we took this map, we have changed the names for our use, and we are now going to look at the Metro Bakersfield area. So in the 409 square miles of Metro Bakersfield, we have 4 areas: Metro North, Metro East, Metro Southeast, and Metro Southwest. So in the metro area, there would be 2 per area. There's no guarantee that 2 would make it through the conditional use permit process, but they are limited to 2. So we would have 8 retail operations in the metro area maximum in the unincorporated area, in contrast to the 70 or 80 that now exist in the city of Bakersfield illegally. So with these 8, as an example, we have also looked at, with applying the setbacks, how much area would there be for these potential operations. These maps have been provided to you, and they have been provided to the public. This is an example of where, with the setbacks, once again, they still have to go through conditional use permits, and they have to go through a discretionary action, but the yellow and purple areas are areas that would be available for these operations. Now, in the corner, we have a disclaimer, and if I could have Mr. Murphy let the public know about this disclaimer. These maps will be online.
So the disclaimer reads, "The purpose of this study map is to provide a visual display of proposed ordinance setbacks and general areas that could comply. This map cannot be used as evidence of compliance with any adopted setbacks by either the state or Kern County for purposes of an application for a permit to either the state of California or Kern County or any other agency. Site-specific analysis of the location of the proposed cannabis activity must be completed by the applicant utilizing site visits and the county GIS system and other tools. That will also be reconfirmed by staff prior to and as part of any application process."
So we are providing these as a study map, but these should not be taken as, I can absolutely put a cannabis facility there. But we did want to provide for you an idea of that while this is a very big map, so you are still talking about hundreds of acres that comply with these setbacks, that are away from residential areas, that are away from libraries, schools, parks, daycare centers, but they still have a cannabis operation. One of the distinctions of a zoning ordinance is it must be achievable. You cannot write a zoning ordinance that's so restrictive that in reality nobody can implement it. That's called a ban. So if you're going to regulate, you have to regulate with actual achievable. The second issue is that this is something that has to be implementable by the planning department. Vague kinds of setbacks or setbacks that are based on what if we do this or what if we do that gives too much of a gray area in our ability to actually explain to the public, explain to the neighbors, these are the rules. So these are the kinds of standards that we have used in bringing forward this regulation. Do we have one more map? And then we just want to show you quickly the last map, which is, this is what it looks like when you impose all the setbacks. We have comments in the record asking us, why haven't we added churches? Why haven't we added other things? The more of these facilities you add, the less places there are, and at that point, there are no places. So we have created this based on, first we started with what the state requirements are, then we looked at places that have children. If a church, for example, had a school, then that would be the school setback. If the church had a permitted large daycare center, which is more than 12 kids, then that would be a daycare setback. If a church had a youth center that was on our books and we knew it was a youth center for youths 11 to 18, then that would be a youth setback. But a church itself, we are very clear on the RLUIPA rules. So if someone opens a church and calls themselves a church, that's very difficult to track. And so we are not proposing churches. We did add libraries, however, which we believe are something that needs to be included. Next. Move back to PowerPoint. This is in, next slide. Have to go up to the top. So, and you can review this in your staff report. These are all the different places that are either a conditional use permit or a site plan for these uses. We've also provided you with the flow charts. Next slide. Once again, under regulate, the 28 plus, currently legally determined, would be allowed to operate for 2 years with a temporary state license for medicinal cannabis only. During that 2 years, they could apply for a conditional use permit at their location, apply for a conditional use permit at another location, but at the end of those 2 years, they would either have to be legal, or they would have to close, or they could ask for an extension through this, a hearing process that's in the ordinance. All illegal would have to close. Next slide. Option B also imposes a 62 cents a square foot of building, not canopy of cannabis. And this allocation is in your staff report. It includes a $1 million community benefit fund for community groups that do drug and alcohol education for youth and youths up to 20, teens and children. It is not specifically that they have to do cannabis education, because as these groups have explained to me, it's a holistic type of education that includes also opiates, methamphetamines, drinking, whatever it includes. In addition, we've added the Homeless Collaborative Fund of $125,000 a year. Next slide. We did do a fiscal public services impact. The property taxes and the sales tax of the county is $1.5 million a year. Please note that medicinal cannabis is exempt from sales tax. This was based on, therefore, on a recreational medicinal mix. While medicinal is exempt from sales tax, it's not exempt from a special tax, which is the next conversation. Next slide. Part of the referral under regulate is to place a ballot measure for a voter tax, voter-imposed tax. This is not a tax on property. This is not a sales tax from that perspective. It's a commodity tax. On indoor cultivation, it is on the square footage of the actual cannabis canopy, so we're back to canopy. And on the processing and preparation and on the retail operations, it is on the gross sales. So it does ramp up. It is an annual tax. Next. These are the projected revenues based on a conservative analysis. And it also, we've estimated 8,750 full-time jobs, which is also conservative. Those jobs pay $18 to $21 an hour, because this is not the retail portion, but the cultivation portion and the processing portion is labor-intensive. Next. All of these ordinances were included in the environmental impact report that you reviewed and that the public received. They were included in the briefing that was provided to the board. These ordinances have had minor changes as we moved forward, as we corrected typos, as we looked at public comments, but the changes have been minor. At this point, we have provided you with a fully adequate environmental impact report. Option A, ban, has 1 mitigation measure, and option B, regulated, has 82 mitigation measures. Next. We received 55 letters. We've also just recently, not on this PowerPoint, but provided to you, the city of Wasco also just gave us a letter. And the city of Taft. Wasco's letter is closer to Taft's letter. It supports a half-mile buffer if the option B is chosen, and does ask for, does ask for an elimination of the, of anything in the spheres of influence. We have received a variety of letters that made suggestions to the ordinances. Some of them we took because they were definitional or other types of industry-specific. We also have comments that have questions. One of the comments that I would like to address is this request from the cities that the sphere of influences be included. The spheres of influences are so large for these cities and include most of the commercial and industrial that it would be impractical to actually have any locations to put any cannabis activities, since, as a reminder, we are not putting dispensaries in A-zoned property. That retail is not what you do in the A zone and is not compatible. So we are not, the Planning and Natural Resource Department is not recommending to the board that they apply this to spheres. The sphere of influence for the city of Bakersfield is the entire 409 square miles. That means that instead of, and there are only 8 dispensaries being proposed. Second, I addressed the church issue. And some of the other questions that were asked of us is cannabis lab testing. Originally, we had required a conditional use permit for them. We looked and said we only have 5 of these. When we talked to cannabis testers who do this in LA, we realized that these are not large quantities. This is not like there's this huge warehouse with bales and bales of cannabis. These are small samples for these testing labs. This is no different than water testing that's done off of Gibson. And so we believe that with the 82 mitigation measures and a site plan review, and with the kinds of buffers that we have, that we can do it as an over-the-counter for the 5 testing. The question is, could we exclude commercial zoning? Once again, there are not enough industrial areas. We did Measure G. Measure G was very, very restrictive, and there are just not enough industrial areas that you can just have retail in those industrial areas. Second of all, the recreational adult use is actually going to be very different from medicinal. Medicinal required that you have a card, and so you have a locked front door and you need this card. Recreational is more akin to, I could walk in. I don't need a card, I just need to be over 21. Therefore, the idea of putting it next to industrial, where we have a cement plant or we have a batch plant, is not good planning. If we're going to regulate, we need these retail operations to conform to normalized business practices. Now, we have included very restrictive other mitigation measures. They have to have ventilation systems that are absolutely certified by a mechanical engineer. There cannot be odors on the sidewalk. There cannot be odors in the parking lot. There cannot be odors that leave there. We've also required that they have a separate entrance for 18-year-olds to 21-year-olds if they're going to do medicinal, and that has to be completely separate from the adult use. So if they want to sell both, they have to have a separate entrance so that we do not have 18-year-olds coming into the recreational adult use side. So we have added that. We're not clear what the state is going to do about that, but we can be more restrictive. One of the last questions was, given that the majority of Kern County voters voted no on Proposition 64, why are we doing this? I was given a referral from the Board of Supervisors to bring forward a comprehensive regulation and a comprehensive ban, and that is what we are bringing forward. Next. So at this time, we are recommending that you, the Planning Department is recommending option B. The current state of our medicinal dispensaries is an air of lawlessness. They are clustered in two areas, Oildale and Rosamond. Some of them have been established legally, but even the legal ones did not get building permits. There's no rules about when they can be open. Many of them have security or don't have security. And there is an air of, we're just going to open up. And when we bring actions against them, they close and move someplace else. That is unacceptable. It is only a misdemeanor now. The state of California has changed the rules. It's not a felony. So we have a misdemeanor, and if you have questions about that, I defer to county council to explain that, misdemeanors have very low levels of things you can do in penalizing these people. We do have fines, and we can pursue that. This industry, for the rest of the state of California, has now been normalized, just like alcohol for over 21. We will have people using this product in Kern County, whether we ban it or we regulate it. I believe the facts show that regulating it, taxing it, and right-sizing this industry into areas where we already do things like grow in high-tech greenhouses will make this industry become part of the normal business practices and not be what it is now, which is a lawless industry that pretty much does what they want when they want it, and in many cases has no background checks. We don't know if the reason that we have the crime that the sheriff has given us statistics is because it's in a bad part of town and because there was no background checks. They're criminals. We don't know because there have been no rules. It's one of the things that we've tried to impress on the public. The public's perception is that the planning department and the board of supervisors is somehow created this industry or is regulating this industry. We're not doing any of that, and no one else is. January 1st, somebody will be. 3 large agencies of the state of California. They want their $1 billion a year in special taxes. They will provide money. They will provide grants. They will provide licensing. And in partnership with them, rather than the county having to create an entire new cannabis division, the way Humboldt County has or California City, we will partner with them. We have large industries right now that produce all sorts of food. Public health relies on the state's rules. They do go in and inspect, and we will inspect. And so we have added one more layer that we think we can do without additional staffing for a transition in regulation. So in the testing ordinance, we have added a requirement that first of all, the 5 testing facilities which are independent cannot be owned by the same person. No more than 2 of them can be owned by the same person, so that we can make sure that we always have legitimate 5 testing facilities. The state will give them a license, and the state will give them standards. There's only so much THC, which is the active ingredient in cannabis. There's only so much of a level they can have. They cannot have pesticides. They cannot have mold. They can't have other additives. But we are also going to require that they review packaging. There are specific packaging requirements. It cannot be ripped open. It has to be cut with scissors. You can't make gummy bears. You can't make lollipops. You can't make anything that looks like candy under the new state regulations. You can't put cartoons on. You can't put different kinds of funny things that could attract children. We will require these testing labs to review that. And they are required at no cost to the county to provide us with a county portal that at any time public health or the CAO or county council or whoever in the county needs to know can access this portal, and we can see how much inventory is passed, what has failed, how much is moving to the dispensaries. So that if we do, and when and if we regulate and impose a tax, the CAO could look to see, are we getting enough taxes from this particular cultivator? They have moved this much product through the testing lab. Does that actually fit with how much of a tax we're getting? So it's another way to make it easier for us to audit them. This testing will also provide for public health an ability to go into a retail operation and see that code and know that it was inspected to our standards. If they see other things from outside the county, then they can ask, where was it tested? Show us the lab, show us the reports. So we have built into this another level of protection that does not require us to staff up and create an entire new government agency. But we do want to make sure that Sacramento, in this period of transition, completes this. That completes my presentation. I am available for questions. There are a number of, in the recommendation, there are repealing of ordinances, there are adoption, we are not going to allow a Williamson Act contract. There are many other details that we are open to questions from your commission.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt. Do any of the commissioners have questions at this time? Please. We do not need that. Thank you.
Chairman, I don't have any questions right now, but I probably will as
Yeah,
we move on.
okay. Could I get a show of hands of how many people would like to speak this evening?
Chris.
Okay, I'll get to you. Okay, now, one more time, a show of hands of those that are in opposition. Okay, show of hands of those that are in favor.
Chairman Babcock, if I may, because of the nature of this particular ordinance, with some people like certain things, I would just request that you open the public hearing and let them work their way through them.
That's what I'm going to do.
All right,
Ms.
thank you.
Poole.
Just a quick question, clarification from Director Oviatt. In terms of the sales tax vote, like what's the timing? What's the proposed timing? And also has the fiscal implications of putting something like that on the ballot, how has that been considered?
Commissioner Poole, through the chair, it would go on the June 5th, 2018, and I believe it would cost $300,000. Is that correct, Mr. Nations?
Ms. Poole, through the chair, the registrar of voters estimates that it would cost under $100,000 if it was on the June ballot.
Thank you, both.
Okay, we will start taking public testimony. We'll start with people that are in opposition to this proposal. It's 7:45. We'll go to 8:45, and then we will close the hearing, except if there are a few still standing that didn't have a chance to speak. So please be expedient. Come up to the podium. State your name for the record. Spell your last name. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Tom Alexander, Alexander. Is Kern County going to pot? Does Kern County really want to chemicalize its residents and create a new and ongoing generation of potaholics, drugs are us kids, tots who toke, and marijuana bees? Even the Bakersfield Californian was against Proposition 64, our view, September 22nd, 2016. Governor Jerry Brown voiced concerns about legalizing cannabis, sharing that he is not sure legalizing marijuana is a good idea in his state because the country could lose its the state could lose its competitive edge if too many people are getting stoned. Bakersfield Californian, March 3rd, 2014. The states that have legalized cannabis have had an upsurge in drug driving statistics, arrests, as well as an increase in all crimes, of which many have been attributed to cannabis use. And I sent all of you an attached letter from the District Attorney of Denver, Colorado, stating that. I hope that you got that particular letter. The State Cannabis Bureau that will regulate Proposition 64 is headed by California's Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, who plans to run for governor in 2018, Brown turns out, and Napster's billionaire co-founder Sean Parker. They wrote Proposition 64, and both stand to make millions of dollars every year from cannabis investments. Only pro-legalization proponents are part of the state's Proposition 64 Cannabis Bureau that will regulate recreational pot. Any changes they make in the future do not have to be approved by voters of Kern County or any county. The 62-page Proposition
Sir,
64.
your time is up.
Thank you very much for doing it, and hopefully you'll vote for the van or recommend the van. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Gabriel Godinez with Godinez Law, Godinez. I want to encourage the chairman and the board, and I want to say thank you to Lorelei and the staff for all the work they've done. I think some of the things we need to highlight, we know this industry is going to be in the state of California. It's going to be regulated. And I encourage the board to take the bull by the horns and like to be proactive and to dictate what happens. If this does not pass and it goes to a vote, which is going to happen in the city, it's going to be dictated to the county and the board as to what happens. So I encourage you to look at the information that was been provided, the regulations that are in place. The concerns of the county will be addressed in the mitigation factors, in the regulation, and it's akin to the industries we have already, cigarettes and alcohol. People say it's a moral issue. Partially it is, but we have these other industries in place already, which are being regulated and making sure that they're taxed and that they're out of the ways of public harm. We cannot ignore this. This is what's forthcoming. I encourage all of you to think carefully as to what your decision is and what your recommendation is to the Board of Supervisors. The regulation makes sense. The regulation is fair. I think the regulation's a little heavy-handed on the tax side, but that is acceptable. So I encourage you to go with one, to adopt the environmental impact report. It's very inclusive. It's very important information there. And I also encourage the board here to adopt the regulation. If we do nothing, it's going to get out of hand. It goes to 2009. If we go with the ban, where's the money to enforce the ban? The general fund, where is that going to be coming from? The ban makes sense. We can also tweak the ban to where if there's any gray areas or holes, they can be filled. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, my name is Max Van Dyke, capital V-A-N, space, capital D-Y-K-E. I'm a local pastor here at Christ Cathedral Church in Bakersfield, and as a local pastor, I'm charged with bringing answers to families that come to me as we've just buried their son or their daughter, and they tell me things like, it was only marijuana. What happened? And we have to continue to stand for the greater good of Kern County and the 258,000 students that we have here in Kern County. You know, legalization of marijuana for adults increases use by minors. Everything I'm going to state is an actual fact. When Alaska permitted the private use of marijuana, use among children rose rapidly and twice the national average. A Canadian study found that the county's liberal marijuana policies have resulted in Canadian youth topping all other nations for frequency and use of marijuana. The leading researcher attributes the increase to affordability, availability, and acceptability. Smoking of marijuana, from a health standpoint, marijuana cigarettes deposits about 3 to 5 times more tar into the lungs than one filtered cigarette. Smoking 3 to 4 joints per day causes as much harm to the respiratory system as smoking a full pack of cigarettes. According to OSHA, marijuana users have 55% more industrial accidents than non-users. And other studies have shown that there's a 78% increase in absenteeism over non-users. Workers who tested positive for marijuana had disciplinary problems at a 64% higher rate. Accident records show that one study showed that up to a 12% for non-fatality of injured drivers and 16% of drivers fatally injured had marijuana in their blood systems. This is a very serious matter that we have to look to for our children.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, my name is Reverend Ramon Vera, V-E-R-A, President of the Hispanic Ministerial Alliance of Kern County. And I'm here to represent that our fellow Hispanic minister clearly oppose to these proposed issues of recreational marijuana. We think it's a very bad idea for our community as a whole, and this is a growing problem in our county. Please do not think about how much profit this could bring to the treasury of the county of Kern. It is a matter of keeping this kind of activity far away from our churches, school, and public places. I know by fact that all law enforcement agencies are against this proposal, and we do minister opposed to this too. Thank you very much, and may God bless Kern County.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Hunter, Hunter. I'd like to turn your attention to a comment letter from the draft environmental impact regulations. It's comment letter number 22. If you don't happen to have it, I have a copy here that I can give you. It's page 192 in the PDF. Would you like a copy of the
I
letter?
think we all have it.
Okay,
Please
well,
continue.
the letter is from Weed Maps. According to Weed Maps, they are the oldest and largest cannabis technology company in the world, and their core platform connects people with local cannabis. In other words, Weed Maps is an online concierge service that connects people with cannabis. And in their comment letter, they state that option B is overly restrictive and will likely incentivize illegal market activity. So with that observation from Weed Maps, I agree that option B will likely incentivize illegal market activity. And I had a few questions for the planning staff. One is, well, I disagree that option B is a regulation. I believe that California has heavily underregulated this drug industry. And the question I have is one, will Weed Maps be regulated from keeping them from posting unregulated sites in Kern County, or will those still be available on Weed Maps? Second question is, will the drug strengths be regulated? And also, will the kinds of marijuana that can be grown be regulated? And finally, will the routes of administration be regulated? Thank you.
Your questions will be answered once we're through with the public portion.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Linda Eviston. I'm the director
Would
of
you please spell your name, please?
EVISTOM.
Thank you.
I am the director of STEPS, which is a DUI and outpatient drug-free program. And I'm also privileged to work on the Kern Stop Meth Now Executive Committee. I'm very concerned, we are very concerned about the spread of marijuana, particularly recreational marijuana. There are a number of things we do know. One is that if a pregnant mom smokes marijuana, that marijuana it crosses the placenta and it endangers the fetus. We also know that there is such a thing as environmental action and environmental results that come from having a lot of access to drugs and or alcohol. And we know that because when we work on the environmental issues for alcohol, it reduces access, which consequently means that both teenagers have less access, less ability to become addicted, and therefore end up not needing treatment. I did notice on the proposal that there is no money in there for treatment. We do know that marijuana is a gateway drug, and it will result in additional people needing drug treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I am Cher Pannell, last name P as in Peter, Annell. I work in Oildale, and I'm a nurse, a retired nurse, registered nurse. And this is what I learned from the website, just to substantiate my stance for a ban, pro-ban. And that is, I will quote my sources here. The National Academy of Science said, use during pregnancy may result in the fetus having lasting behavioral and mental defects, may have learning problems. When rats are given this same cannabis, they show hyperactivity. Do we need that more in our children? According to the Cleveland Clinic, which is a reputable site for research and treatment, again, all of this is in exposure to the fetus if the mother smokes marijuana during pregnancy. Increased chance of being born addicted. Do we need more of that in Kern County? Increased chance of being born with serious health problems. Increased chance of being born prematurely, and increased chance of low birth rate. Do we need more babies in our neonatal unit in KMC in our private hospitals? Can we afford the payment for that? This one is from CDC in an article called Preventing Birth Defects. There is no safe level of marijuana use during pregnancy. No safe. And it's the first 3 months, sometimes before the woman even knows she's pregnant. A gentleman spoke up in a meeting I was in to reduce drug use in Oildale. He owns a marijuana shop, and he said, what do I do when women come in with a form?
Your time's up.
So, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Ben Eilenberg, Eilenberg. Let me, by the way, say congratulations, Mr. Chairman. You will be missed on this commission.
Thank you.
And our loss is the state's gain. I do want to address 2 points. The first is, and let me say this, I am a lawyer who represents a number of the corporate interests that want to come to Kern if Kern passes regulation to bring in corporate commercial cannabis operations. The 2 points that I would make are these. Number one of the items that has been left out of this debate has been the impact on the local economy, not in terms of tax revenues from cannabis operations, but in terms of the economic realities that then lift up the supporting businesses, the local accountants, the local real estate agents, the local web designers. All of these industries gain new customers in the commercial cannabis operations. This has proved a very large boon to many local economies for businesses, small businesses owned by local people who are supporting the outside industry that has come in to become the new industry in town. The second thing I would simply mention is what has been shown in other states and in California is that the bans generally don't work because A, the ban cannot stop personal use or personal growth. The only thing that it can stop is what commercial activities happen in town. And by enacting a ban, you rob the municipality of the very resources it needs to enact that same ban. With that, I will surrender the rest of my time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Delamater, Delamater. I am a registered pharmacist, a businessman in Oildale, as well as a resident of Oildale. I have the position that a ban of marijuana is essential because the Board of Supervisors 3 years ago established the Stop Meth Now program. Marijuana and alcohol are precursors to methamphetamine. Secondly, the city of Bakersfield has adopted a stance banning marijuana, and for Oildale, which is part of the county of Kern, to go contrary to the city of Bakersfield would not be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Brown, like the color, B-R-O-W-N, and I'll be brief. There's so many people, but I would like to address a number of statistics that have been brought up that are in favor of the ban. They are largely outdated, and there are contradicting statistics. In general, there's a problem in society with a lack of ability to do statistics among people, those who present them. But I will sort of skip over that rather than presenting counter statistics. All right, what I would like to mainly address, my key point, is the criminality that is associated with marijuana use. And I believe that if you look inarguably at alcohol use and the criminality, the violence, extremes amounts of it during Prohibition is inarguable. And that was vastly removed upon legalization and regulation. And I believe we'll see very similar here. And other states have seen similar. And in regards to sweeping epidemics such as painkiller and opioid use, those actually tended to gone down. And a couple of statistics, I said I wouldn't, but gateway drug, that has been largely debunked. And in fact, tobacco is much stronger of a gateway drug from modern studies. And I'll be super brief, I'm done.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, good evening. My name is Douglas McAfee, M-C-A-F-E-E. Longtime advocate of marijuana use, and I'm with Bakersfield Normal. We opposed Proposition 64, and I voted no on Prop 64 because we thought that it would open up a whole bunch of new regulations that would really put out the individual and benefit the people with money. And but even though I do support regulation, Bakersfield Normal and we oppose A and B, and we think that the county should take no action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm Jim Marino, M-A-R-I-N-O, with Marino Associates. I'm here representing 5 of the medical marijuana dispensaries that are on the legal list. I first want to commend staff for doing a wonderful job within a very short time frame on that EIR. My comments are in consideration of the residents of Kern County who use cannabis products for medical uses. The EIR only addresses the all or none decisions, but should have also considered accommodating those county residents who are currently using the products for a variety of medical purposes. Dosages of cannabis can now be graded in a lab and can be relatively uniform. Products can range from high THC, which is the active ingredient, to no THC or any of the gradients in between. Some medical problems that different doses has shown help with relieving include muscle spasms caused by multiple sclerosis, seizure disorders, various cancer effects, and various pain. Over the past few years, since the state of California has decriminalized the use, many Kern County residents have been relieved of that pain and suffering with the medical use of some form of product. My observation at my clients' facilities is that many of these people, because of their medical problems, can't drive. And when I look at the map of where the facilities will be allowed, I think it's going to take them out of being able to access their medical products. So whatever decision is made ultimately, I think that the medical patients for medical marijuana need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Allison Burrows, B-U-R-R-O-W-E-S. I am a Deputy Director with the Kern Behavioral Health and Recovery Services Department. We are the health plan responsible for the mental health and addiction drug treatment and prevention for the County of Kern. We have over 28 years of experience in alcohol and drug prevention within the community, and we've been involved in discussions on marijuana access and impact for many years at the national, state, and local level. I would like to speak to some of the risks associated with legalization and to share our position on this issue. Developmental problems associated with regular marijuana use during adolescence include reduced IQ scores, poorer school performance, higher school dropout rates, as well as decreased attention and impaired cognitive and verbal performance. Teens are especially at risk for addiction, with around 1 in 6 regular youth users becoming addicted. Studies have also found a link between marijuana use by teens and an increased incidence of mental illness, particularly psychosis. Kern Behavioral Health and Recovery Services opposes the cultivation, processing, and sale of cannabis products in Kern County. Our position is based on the health and safety risks posed to the community, especially the youth. However, our department recognizes that this initiative has been approved by public vote, and as such, if the commission recommends option B and our county chooses to move forward, we would like to establish that our department has the experience, resources, and expertise to anchor the prevention plan that should be developed concurrently. This includes policy-based strategies to protect our most vulnerable youth. In development of these strategies, our department welcomes collaboration with both public and private agencies and with those involved in legal commercial cannabis activities within the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Carol Bender, B-E-N-D-E-R. I'm a licensed registered nurse and public health nurse. I reside in the unincorporated area of Kern County. Kern County residents are both conservative and compassionate. We allowed medical marijuana dispensaries at first in an effort to provide an option to those who might not otherwise be able to obtain it to see or decide for themselves if it could help with their health-related issues. Since that time, illegal dispensaries, related crime, and other illegal activities have created havoc and have made enforcement extremely difficult. When our leaders and citizens attempted to strictly limit these locations of the dispensaries through their majority votes of yes on Measure G, the marijuana industry and its proponents fought in the courts to strike it down. Thus, we have the EIR. Since Measure G, Proposition 64 is passed, opening the door to decriminalizing marijuana use and possession with specific limits. And now those desiring to buy marijuana for their medical use can grow it, have it gifted to them by any California resident over 21, and have it delivered to their homes by retail stores outside of our unincorporated county. The need in Kern County for storefronts is gone. A Kern County citizen majority clearly voted no on Proposition 64. Proposition 64 also clearly states that counties and cities have the right to ban marijuana. It's not widely understood that the state requires both cultivation and sales of recreational marijuana for the cities and counties to share in the benefit of the 15% excise tax monies it will collect and control. The Kern County citizen majority did not support legalizing recreational marijuana and its associated businesses. We certainly do not want this sort of full-blown marijuana industry. Voting for option B will not necessarily protect Kern County from the possibility that marijuana proponents will petition against it as well, as many prefer fewer restrictions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening. I'm Dr. David Goh, G-O-H, Senior Pastor, the Garden Community Church. Our county has the opportunity to learn some hard lessons of unintended consequences and unanticipated implications from regions that earlier legalized the cultivation and sale of recreational marijuana. Scholarly, peer-reviewed studies are now presenting hard facts of the serious public safety and health risks associated with the sale of recreational marijuana. And in all due respect to the gentleman who spoke earlier, the studies I'm citing are from 2016 and 2017. So according to the 2017 study from the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA is a well-recognized medical journal, after Washington State legalized marijuana, use of the drug doubled among 8th and 10th graders. A study in 2016 from the Journal of the American Medical Association, once again, found that after the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, the Children's Hospital of Colorado had nearly twice as many children visit the hospital from ingesting marijuana, and annual poison control cases quintupled among children. A new study published in the Journal of Primary Prevention found that in Denver, the density of marijuana outlets in an area was associated with increased property crime in adjacent neighborhoods. They found that 84 more property crimes occurred in the neighborhoods near dispensaries. The same study also did a counter study in Long Beach where they showed a dramatic decrease in violent and property crimes when the numbers of dispensaries went down from 38 to 5. In an article published by the Department of Health and Human Services, it concluded that furthermore, the risk of driving under the influence of both alcohol and cannabis is greater than the risk of driving under the influence of either alone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
My name is Deborah Moore, M-O-O-R-E. I only have a couple of things to say. I objected when you said that you're not going to worry about having the locations close to a church. A library is more important than a church. I am here to protest. It's my understanding that you can deny our having recreational marijuana approved in this county. This is a conservative county. There may be a lot of marijuana users here, but if the rest of the county knew what you were approving tonight, they would be here.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Manuel Ramirez, R-A-M-I-R-E-Z. I am a resident of Kern County's 5th District. I am a former candidate for Bakersfield City Council and State Assembly. I currently work with an organization supervising state inmates and state parolees, as well as working with organizations that are fighting the gang violence issue in our city. I am here tonight to urge a vote in favor of option A, banning the mass cultivation of marijuana in Kern County. In 2014 and 2016 alike, when I went door-to-door speaking to constituents and residents in Kern County and the city of Bakersfield, almost all were in opposition of allowing marijuana for recreational use in their communities. The truth of the matter is, Kern County residents do not want this in their communities. I am one of those residents who does not believe in putting profits over the safety and well-being of our communities. I am constantly in the community working with at-risk youth who have challenges in learning and behavior, and I believe that is a result of their marijuana use and access in their communities. The current fight against the violence in our community is tough enough in and of itself. We cannot afford to make matters worse. So again, I urge a vote in favor of banning the mass cultivation of marijuana in Kern County, and I quote scripture when I say, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul?" Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N. I didn't bring any data, but I figured it's mostly your jobs and hers to provide reasonable data. I wouldn't trust some from general public, but that's just me. I also think that there's an immense amount of fear going around over the idea of marijuana coming into the county, which is reasonable. However, regardless of what we do, it's coming into the county. If we don't regulate it, if we ban it, someone can go somewhere else, buy it, and bring it in. We can't stop that. So the most reasonable thing I can see then is to regulate what our own area is better. And the entire point of having a government position is to see to regulations. Bans, I don't know if any of that work. We don't want to ban guns, which I can understand. There's shootings, but we still don't ban them. That's because we want to regulate and make sure that they're used properly. Alcohol causes an immense amount of problems for people, but no one's up here talking about banning alcohol. That's reasonable. cigarettes. We're not talking about banning cigarettes. There's a huge role of objects and items that we consume that harm us, but we don't ban. I've never seen it as a government official's job to tell me yes or no to something, but to create a structure with which something can safely be used. And I don't see any other option but to regulate. I suppose you could go with abstaining, and that might be the best compromise in that case. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Johnson, Johnsson, and I stand before you shaking because I'm afraid that you're going to penalize people like me who use medical marijuana to treat pain issues and health issues. I stand before you tonight cancer-free, and I have my beautiful red hair back, and I'm able to walk around and talk to all of you. And I'm no longer taking chemo pills and radiation, and I have my beautiful body back. I can eat whatever I want and not throw up. I can sleep at night. I don't punish the people who use it for the reasons that it is intended for. Please consider regulating it instead of banning it, because people who need it use it. They're going to abuse any type of substance if they can find it. Alcohol, cigarettes, minors get it wherever. They get it from their parents. They get it from wherever. If people, the responsible people who do use it and have it at their readiness to be able to get it and use it, need it, please consider regulating it. Don't punish the people who need it. Don't punish the people who can't drive to get it. Please consider regulating it for everybody who does need it. I am a productive citizen of Kern County, and I do pay taxes. I do go to work. I have two part-time jobs that make a full-time job. I make rent. I pay all my bills. I am a productive citizen standing before you who do and have used it. Please consider regulating it. Thank you, and I will forfeit the rest of my time. But before I do leave the podium, can I please ask the council to allow my friend that came here with me tonight to speak before everybody else, because she is very injured and she cannot stand in the line.
Sure. Go ahead and have her come down.
Thank you so much. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Hi, my name is Serenity Hansford. Last name Hansford.
Would you pull the mic up closer to you?
I'm a little tall. Hansford. First name Serenity. I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, sciatica, massive panic disorder in 2014. And they prescribed me what they prescribe every other person. They gave me antidepressants, they gave me pain medication, they gave me anti-anxiety medication. I was not able to completely get my pain gone. I wasn't able to function. There was never enough. With the pain medication they were providing me with, it's never enough. My body it's natural for us to develop tolerances to substances that are legal, and they're more harmful. The pills they were giving me are more harmful to my body. As soon as I started smoking medical marijuana, I became able to stand. It hurts right now to stand, but I am able to function doing the dishes, cleaning my own hygiene, taking care of my mother. If it was legal for me to work in childcare, I worked with autistic children for 5 years and I was good at it. And I am unable to be a productive member of society because people are afraid of people dying, and that is completely understandable. But if we want to really focus on that topic, we need to increase the importance of mental health in Kern County, because I have sought mental health before, and it is incredibly difficult for somebody without $150 to spend an hour. That's all I have. 1 second. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Espindola, Espindola. I'm going to go over some quick statistics. The CDC statistics say that close to 1.7 million people are using cannabis to find relief. 1.6 patients with Crohn's disease, that's what I have. Multiple sclerosis, over 4 million patients are currently using medical marijuana. Seizures, 3 million. Then we come to post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, 22 veterans commit suicide a day due to PTSD. According to the CDC, 24 million people are Americans are using medical marijuana to find relief, and no one can argue that those veterans that are coming back home don't deserve the best. The last number is 100 million people are using medical marijuana for pain. Let me give you one more statistic. A 2014 study published in the Journal of American Medical Association found that the state that implemented medical marijuana cannabis laws have appeared to have a 25% lower opiate death rate. Imagine that, 25% less deaths in opiates. Opiates are people who are dealing with chronic pain. Let me go back, 100 million patients are using chronic pain, are using medical marijuana to heal themselves from chronic pain. Let's also remember what this is going to do to our deputies in town. Remember that they are the lowest paid deputies around, number 74 out of 75 departments. They can already walk across the street to Bakersfield and get $1,800 more a month. If the surrounding communities legalize medical marijuana and we don't, or marijuana and we don't, how are we going to compensate and repay these deputies to stay with us? We need these deputies to stay. We need to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Wallace Martin, Martin, and I'm a city councilman from Ridgecrest. Tonight, I'm proud to be joined by our acting police chief, Jed McLaughlin, and acting Captain Ryan Maroney, who will speak very briefly in just a minute. Tonight, we stand strong with our local police chief, as well as the sheriff of Kern County, in voting to ban all marijuana cultivation and sales in Kern County. Folks, let's be very clear here. This is one of, if not the most important single issue that this commission has probably ever faced since we started off, since its inception. Legalizing a mind-altering drug will change our society and our culture forever. This is not for right now, it's probably forever. Drugs are already on every street corner and taking over our communities and destroying families. The mastermind goal of this whole thing was very simple. It was to trick the public into believing that pot is good medicine, and also to trick our local elected officials into thinking that there would be an unbelievable amount of money lining the coffers to take care of problems. So the people have caught on. We already have said no in 2016, Prop 64. Kern County voted 54% to say no to pot. In my opinion, it would have completely failed statewide if the high-powered drug lobby had not spent more than $25 million in deceitful propaganda. Folks, here's the playbook, and it's very simple. You throw a massive amount of money at it, and if you tell a lie long enough and loud enough, eventually people will believe it. And forget about all the money the county's supposed to make, hogwash. It looks great on the surface, but for every dollar the county says they're going to make, I contend they'll lose 5 times the amount in business productivity, plummeting. Our young minds will be demotivated, and our DUI deaths and crime rates will skyrocket. And I'd like to just end with one quick thing. When we all get ready for work in the morning and we look into the mirror, I ask ourselves, for our children,
Thank you, sir.
Is that something that we really want now and in the future? And I contend the answer is no.
Okay. If you folks can't control yourself, I am going to have these chambers cleared. I am not going to tolerate shouting, clapping, or any other nonsense. This is a serious meeting, and I've got several deputies here, and I will clear these chambers, and we will finish this meeting without you. Is that clear? Next speaker.
Hello, sir. Board, Ms. Ovia. My name is T.J. Esposito. I'm a local citizen here in Kern County. It's a tough act to follow, by the way. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Sylvia, thank you very much for doing so much due diligence and bringing forth answers to the long time-awaited questions that we've had. It seems as though the opposition and the proponents tonight are re-debating Prop 64. Prop 64 has been passed in California. It's going to be legal 21 and over January 1st. You know, some of the things that were very compelling from the opponents tonight are keeping it out of the hands of our kids. Okay, but there's really one simple fact. Besides the fact it's going to raise a lot of money, besides the fact that, you know, I mean, it's good for problems like cancer and all this stuff. There's really one simple thing, and I think Ms. Soviet mentioned it when she was speaking, was if we're going to keep it out of the hands of our kids, it's legal for people 21 and over, we've got to be checking IDs, okay? If you ban, you're basically banning commercial use. It's going to push it down to the street dealers, and street dealers do not check ID, okay? Dispensaries do. Dispensaries check IDs. These places need to be regulated. I would highly recommend an option B, because at the end of the day, we check ID for cigarettes, we check ID for alcohol. We need to be checking ID for cannabis, plain and simple. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to remind you, we have 15 minutes left. If you have a spokesperson for your group, I encourage you to use that person. But we are going to shut this down in 15 minutes. So next speaker.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Jed McLaughlin, MC, LAUGHLIN. I had a thing written here, but I think I'm not going to do it. Everybody said a lot of the stuff I was going to talk about anyway. We all know that statistics can be swayed one way or the other. And I think since Colorado's inception of their marijuana program in 2013 or 2012, they should have stats by now. And when you look, you can find either direction. One says one thing, one says another. And I know that there's a lot of people in here that probably grew up the same time I did, watching Saturday morning cartoons. The one thing that we've gotten rid of is the education part. We don't have any education hardly in the schools. Law enforcement is so short right now that we used to have officers in the school all the time teaching drug education and prevention. Well, not a lot of us can afford that anymore. All of us are understaffed, and we're not ready for this. So I ask that you choose option A. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Tristan Kasinger, that's spelled K-A-S-I-N-G-E-R. I represent the Young Progressive Coalition of Central California, and we would like to say that we are in favor of option B. I have 2 points. My first one is that in 1919, we passed an amendment to the US Constitution that made it so that you can't buy alcohol or sell it. And that led to 13 years of probably the worst crime epidemics we've seen in our country, so much so that for a century afterwards, we still have mobsters who were pretty much running all of the illegal trade. That shouldn't happen again, and that's exactly what will happen if you guys vote for option A. It'll just be illegal and it will all be bad. The second point I'd like to make, I am a medical marijuana patient myself. I suffer from fibromyalgia, which is a central nervous disease that causes extreme pain, muscle spasms, anxiety, depression, and a whole host of other neurological problems. Marijuana has more effectively managed my symptoms than any prescription medication I've taken over the last 7 years since being diagnosed. And option A, I worry that people like me will not have easy access to what is life-saving medication. If I am too far away from a dispensary, if dispensaries can't open up anywhere near my house, then I can't go get my medication because driving long distances is just not an option for someone who's as sick as I am. So I ask, please vote for option B, and I surrender the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Commission. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Director. You guys have done a lot of hard work, and we appreciate that. My name is David Abbasi. I'm with the Central Valley Cannabis Association.
Could you spell your last name?
Abbasi, A-B-B-A-S-I.
Thank you.
With Central Valley Cannabis Association. I am a native of Bakersfield, and I love my hometown. We are a group of industry and business professionals that adhere to higher standards. We self-regulate, and we have good business practices. I just wanted to talk briefly about a few points here, not take up too much of your time. I personally use cannabis and have been using since I was 16, and I think that I'm doing better than most for whatever that's worth. The medical benefits of cannabis are clear. There have been thousands of studies done worldwide that have shown its medical efficacy, and that is not in debate. Marijuana being a gateway drug actually now is looking like an exit drug for those of our patients and members that are getting off of opioids and using less prescription medications or getting off prescription medications entirely because they're switching to cannabis. So that's a good thing. Crime. We have a lot of crime, and it's associated with bans. And the reason a lot of people don't realize, the reason we have crime is because of bans or because we don't have regulation. So we'd like to see the crime element being addressed. And the Sheriff's Department, we have a lot of hardworking men and women that are underpaid, and we would like to see them get paid more for their service and putting their lives on the line. We are tired of unfair competition. We're getting ran out of business by these players that don't play by the same set of rules, and they're pushing us out. So, you know, the will of the people clearly have spoken. Taxes can help. Obviously, instead of raising taxes on the county voters, tax me, and we'll help you guys too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Philip Barrios, B-A-R-R-I-O-S. I'm a native here in Bakersfield, born and raised. I'm also HIV positive. When I first started taking my meds, it was all I could do, just throw it up. So I couldn't take the meds. After I started smoking marijuana, I could take the meds, I wouldn't throw up, I could feed, I could eat. I remember that at one point, if I ate that minute, it was good. But 5 minutes later, I had no appetite. When I drank or ate the marijuana, it was all good. And now I've gained my weight again. I'm looking great. People don't even know that I have HIV. I look great. And again, please don't close the marijuana. It helps me very much. And for the people that don't believe that the marijuana does work, it does. The people that say, close them, where are their Christianity? That's what I want to know. Where's your Christianity? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Sherry Tedisco. It's Todisco. For 20 years, I spent my life according to the letter of the law as a law enforcement officer. One day, I was diagnosed as a breast cancer victim. I suffered through 2 years of treatment. I made it through it. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed again with breast cancer, metastasis with bone cancer. I quit my career. Bone cancer is the most painful cancer to die with no cure. I am dying. I'm scared of the pain that I know I'm going to endure in my future. The side effects of legal pain meds is as bad as my chemo. I watched last year my mother-in-law die of an awful death of cancer with pain meds only. My own mother has just been diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer, and I will not let her suffer as I watched my other loved one. I am a CBD oil treatment along with my chemo and all my pain and my side effects. My tumor count has dropped and stopped. My oncologist is completely supportive of my cannabis. There is no stopping this drug. Regulate it, do what you must, but please don't punish us that are sick and we need it. I only wish I could tell you of all the things that it is helping me do and help me live and get through this. What I want each and every one of you sitting on that board and sitting out in that public, I want you to go home tonight and think, what will you do and how will you handle your life choice when you are diagnosed with a cancer, or your mother or your father or your child? Because it will live. If you live long enough, you will be diagnosed with cancer. It will happen to you. And I only pray that it doesn't. If I could take everyone's pain, I would surely do it. Please don't punish us that are sick. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker. We're down to 5 minutes, so let's try to get as many in as we can.
Hello, my name is Cassidy Shepard, Sheppard. I just want to say that I am against this ban. I believe that, well, I have a lot of very strong beliefs and feelings towards this, but I believe that politics should remain objective, so therefore I brought you a list of statistics. The Drug Policy Alliance found that legalization hasn't had any form of negative impact on public health, and this is based off of states that have already legalized marijuana. The number of students who use marijuana in the past 30 days leveled out in 2010, and they have looked at current reporting in 2015. There has been no increase of kids in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, or Alaska. There's no increase. Also, with traffic death, there has been no rise in Colorado or Washington since legalization. Therefore, any argument against that is false. And the biggest point that I would like to make is that the opioid epidemic is like very severe in our country, and it's killing lots and lots of people, more than car accidents. And in states where they have legalized marijuana, these overdoses have gone down and actual opioid users have gone down. And also in Kern County, in 2015, we had double the state's opioid addiction rate. So opioid addiction in Kern County is a very serious issue. Therefore, banning this could help increase the opioid epidemic. So I think that the facts just clearly show that we need to regulate this and we should never ban it, because this is going to help the public health, and this will also help run drug dealers out of business, such as the Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am DJ Tuhig, that's Twohig, and I wanted to acknowledge the planning department as well as fellow colleague at Kern Tax, Ms. Poole. This evening, I've heard a lot of dialogue with respect to patients advocating for option B. I've also listened to opponents who desire the option A. And what's interesting as you listen to the conversations that we're hearing is the reference to education. And so I'd encourage all those who have a tablet or an iPhone to open up procon.org. And there are scientific proven facts about cannabis. 55 pro scientific facts and 13 cons. The 13 cons speak about the children mostly and the exposure to cannabis and the negative effects. So through mitigation, we can resolve many of those issues of the exposure to children. And so having read parts of the EIR, I appreciate all the mitigation measures that are noted therein. With respect to the comments about corporate agriculture and the rich getting richer per se, there are also small farmers and boutique farmers that do very well and create wonderful products and CBDs that are healing people, have many healing properties. It releases the brain in a certain way that no other product can. And that brings about health and wellness for those that need treatment. So we do encourage you to follow the staff's recommendation, acknowledge the competency in the reports, and we look forward to further dialogue when the tax ballot measure comes forward. We hope to be helpful to Kern County's economic future. And thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Dirk Voss. That's spelled V as in Victory, OSS.
I'd like to comment that one, your staff has done a tremendous job, and thank you for what the thoroughness of what they've done and the for the staff and the time they've given to this. I'm urging that you oppose option A and you support option B. You know, this is not an issue of whether or not Prop 64 or whether we should allow cannabis in the county or not. The cannabis is going to be here in the county, whether you like it or not. It's already here. And if you read in the EIR, it also indicates that if you don't regulate it here, people will simply drive to nearby counties and purchase it, or they'll go through the black market. So it's here. So then the issue now is, what is the benefit of this? And let's look at the legal industry has proven that it drives out the illegal market. It encourages regulation to get rid of the bad eggs, and it provides an Apple store versus a Snoop Dogg kind of a store. No offense to Snoop Dogg, I like his music, but those are the kind of dispensaries that you don't want, but you want an Apple store. The illegal market, the legal market encourages quality and research and development. And the state regulations are so incredibly strict that they've increased the standards so high by the testing and what's required. Let's talk about the state. Somebody mentioned about the impairment of driving and those kind of things. They already have a state commission already in place under the Bureau of Cannabis that already says, guess what? We're going to design programs of enforcement. It's in place. I've met with the director. I saw the presentations in Sacramento. I saw what Lori Ajax has put together. This is one of the most highly regulated state-regulated departments in the country. Over what mistakes other states have made, we won't be making here in the state. Along with the oil industry and the agriculture industry, what's awesome about having this here is the multiplier effect. You basically have a recession-proof kind of industry that creates multiple different factors that create from the dispensary, from entry-level jobs to cultivation jobs to research and development and lab and what have you. And you've created
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I'm already cut off?
Okay. For those of you that are standing, please wait a minute. A show of hands, how many are in support of A? How many are in support of B? Okay. I think we have gotten plenty of testimony this evening.
Chairman Babcock, if I may ask, the sheriff's representative would like to make a comment and has been standing in line. I would ask that you permit him as a
I will
staff
accept
member. Thank you.
that, yes. You're done.
Am I done?
You're done.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. The sheriff's representative? The rest of you can have a seat.
Good evening. Chief Deputy Larry McCurtain, MCC, URTAIN with the Kern County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to reiterate that the Sheriff's Office strongly opposes the regulation of this topic. The Sheriff's Office has extensive experience dealing with not only dispensaries, but marijuana cultivation and the issues and the crime and criminal activity that are associated with it. Although the Planning Department has provided a very detailed and extensive report, the Sheriff's Office at any future hearings will be prepared to elaborate on our personal experiences throughout the years dealing with and combating illegal narcotics to include marijuana. So again, the Sheriff's Office strongly opposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Babcock.
Go ahead, Ms.
I
Yvette.
apologize. I believe that Commissioner Poole has a question for you. I apologize.
Oh, we have two questions, yes. Ms. Poole.
Sorry, mic's off. I'm just wondering if we could ask the folks that had been in line, and including at least one gentleman who said he couldn't stand in line, if they've got anything that is different than what we've heard, just to make sure that we haven't missed. That's more people than I think were in line, which is problematic. We're not opening up for public comment entirely again, right? But I'm a little concerned that there were a number of people who could have been in line the whole hour and maybe have something different to say.
Well, it was apparent they were all in support of option B.
Chairman
Yes.
Babcock, we do have, if I just may ask, this is a public hearing. We are trying to be orderly. However, could we take this mic to the gentleman with the white hair, if you can wave at me?
Sure.
And we will let him give, and you would let him give testimony. We do need to make accommodations for people who may have some reason that they can't stand.
Sure.
Certainly, we, As a reminder, the Planning Commission, this is only the hearing recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. There will be another opportunity for a final comments. But if we can make this work, can we get, if we could get KGov to get us a, we need KGov
We need a
to come out
portable
and get
mic,
us,
guys,
please.
back
We need
there.
a portable mic that works, please.
Melissa, do you have disclosures to make? Did you meet with anyone?
Chairman Babcock, if I may, while we are technologically working here, if I could address some of the issues that were brought up for your commission.
Go right ahead.
I appreciate all the comments, and I certainly do understand that there are many different studies. We would like to note, however, that in your addendum, we have extracted out and provided to your commission the federal data survey that does show that in Colorado, this is the National Survey on Drug Use and Health state-level data. It does show that in ages 12 to 17, cannabis use has actually gone down sharply, even after legalization. It's a 12% drop. The same study shows that 18 to 25-year-olds, there is a 1% among adults increase. While we do not dispute that any increase may be viewed by some medical professionals who spoke, we would like to note that they are adults over 21 and have a choice as to what they want to do with a legal drug. Our concern in the land use arena is with teens and young people. So I would just like to know we have provided that in the record and we have provided that to the public. Second, we did provide a Journal of Medical Association journal of 1,000 peer-reviewed. Do we have this working now? Okay, so I now defer to the gentleman to make his comments.
Thank you. And first, my name is Jeff Jarvis. I am a citizen of Bakersfield, and I'm
Could you spell your last name, please?
Jarvis.
Thank you.
And I would like to make it very clear. I know that there's individuals in this room that certainly have illnesses that are much more dramatic than mine, but to stand in a line for over an hour would have been a very difficult thing for me to do, as well as my wife. So just briefly, I'd like to suggest that the commission take that into consideration in any other open meeting, because everyone should have the opportunity to bring forward their viewpoint and speak to this commission. That being said, I am here to support option B, that of creating regulation. What I think the commission already knows is that for the last 10 years, this county has taken numerous approaches to how to regulate or stop or create regulation for cannabis, and they have all failed. This has cost our county hundreds of thousands of dollars. The only way that we can satisfy all the members of our community is with regulation. Regulation satisfies and allows for individuals that are utilizing cannabis for medicinal purposes to have access to the medicine of their choice. It protects our community by utilizing regulation. We move these businesses out of the residential communities. We have caps on what will be within regions. I also would like to add my good comments to how thorough and how much due diligence was done here, and really in a short period of time. And I think that has been presented very well today. But again, by regulating cannabis, you protect our community, you get it out of neighborhoods, you get it away from schools, you treat it as a normal business, and you allow for all the other benefits that are associated with that, from education to treat difficult drug conditions to money for our community, sheriff's department, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have more comments, Ms. Oviatt?
I do, but I would hope that the chairman is prepared to close the public comment?
I am. At this time, I am closing the public, well, first off, are any of the commissioners wish to speak to one individual out there that may have raised an issue? Okay.
I would.
Okay, who is that
Can I do
person?
It was Jeb McLaughlin. Is Mr. McLaughlin still here? Yes. Mr. McLaughlin, are you the chief of police from Ridgecrest? Yes. I had a real brief question for you, and then also for.
Could you come up to the podium, please? Please state your name again for the record.
Jed McLaughlin, McLaughlin.
Chief McLaughlin, with driving under the influence of alcohol or methamphetamine, heroin, those types of things, you can do a urine blood test and quantify the amount of the substance in someone's blood, and then you can, there's studies where experts can come in and use that evidence to tell if someone's under the influence during a criminal case, correct?
Correct.
Can you do that with marijuana?
Yes.
How is that done?
They either do a blood or a urine test, and since marijuana stays in the system a lot longer than most drugs, I believe our lab is able, the county's lab, sorry, is able to distinguish some kind of time frame and the levels of THC that's in there.
And they can get the level at a certain time and backtrack and say this person was under the influence of marijuana at a certain time?
Well, like any drug, the body's metabolism, it depends on what type of metabolism that you have. So some people may use it quicker, some people may use it slower. So it's hard to gauge that, but there would be a specific number, so a range, I guess, if you want to say, so that might show more recent use. So it'd be hard to pinpoint an exact day.
It's difficult to pinpoint, unlike with alcohol and other drugs, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I'm closing the public portion of this hearing and turning it over for the commissioner's comment and action.
I actually had
I
had a question
other-
for staff as well.
And I actually have other comments in
And,
response to the
and
question.
to staff first.
Thank you.
Do you want to go?
Commissioner Louie,
I had
if
a
I could go over these responses and then take
Sure.
your question, would that work?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in the response to comments appendix Q1 and Q2, we have placed the Journal of American, the JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, 1,000 peer-reviewed studies on medicinal cannabis, which we have provided to you in the response to comments many weeks ago. I would just like to note that they did note there are many uses for medicinal cannabis, but they also noted that there's never been a documented overdose from the use of medicinal cannabis. They have also indicated, however, that it is not like insulin, it is not immediately necessary for life. It may absolutely be necessary for pain control and other sorts of things, but we have used this information to determine the appropriate density of how many retail operations we need. The state regulations will now require for mobile that you have a retail operation. So mobile is not a solution. We can't just have mobile and no retail operations. So that is a state determination, and retail, it can only be with retail. You can't have mobile from a cultivator, for example. So that is all part of how we have determined enough of a network of retail operations to provide for both the medicinal needs and the adult use. Second, there was a question about density limitations. We agree that density is a problem, and we concur with that study from Colorado. That is why we are limiting the density to 2 retail operations in 16 areas, which means there would only be 8 in the entire 409 square miles of Metro Bakersfield, 2 in the entire Rosamond area of over 300,000 acres. So we do believe that density is an issue, and so we have limited the density. There was a question about they have not heard anything for treatment, money for treatment. Proposition 64, it's clearly laid out in the Cannabis Tax Revenue Code There's $554 million on these special taxes that will be produced every year for youth and drug education. Those will be given out to grants to counties and cities. They include and they emphasize a multi-generational approach to family-based intervention. That is $554 million a year that does not exist now and will not exist without this industry. We did look at the study on poison control from Denver, where we did have this spike in child. The state of California has looked at it as well. The reason was there was no limit on the THC and there was no regulation on how much you could put into edibles. The state of California has severely restricted that. They are established a THC limit. They've established strict amounts for how much can go into each one of the little pieces of the brownies. And I would note that the state of California is learning from all of the things that have gone wrong in these other jurisdictions. The last two items were, there was a question about weed maps. No, we don't regulate the internet. Kern County doesn't regulate the internet, and neither does anybody else in California. However, I would note that our best source of illegal operations so that we can go close them down is weed maps. As far as drug types, yes, the state will regulate that. We're not totally clear what the comment was about in regards to drug types, but yes, there will be limits on the THC. They will not be able to sell spice. They're not going to be able to sell these other things. And there is also a very complicated administrative route called seed to sale, track and trace. Every single seed and every single plant will have a number. There will be an electronic system. The last two comments, I have addressed the access issue and how we determined how many on page 5 and 6 of the staff report, and I want to apologize if I left the impression that churches are not important. Churches are critically important to our communities. We are requiring conditional use permits on the retail operations. Churches will be provided notification. They can come to this very same planning commission and express their feelings and bring out people. And we have let the industry know that if this industry was regulated, we have let the industry know that just like housing developers, just like wind developers, they need to understand their neighborhoods before they pick a location. They need to understand and cite their operations within community context. This is not about just, we're going to regulate and you can open up wherever you want, which is what we have now. Thank you for giving me the time, and I am available, Commissioner Louie, now for your question.
Okay, Commissioner Louie?
Thank you. Director Arviat, can you briefly explain, because I hope there's no confusion with the people who came out to speak tonight, that what we do tonight, whether we regulate by banning or regulate by allowing it, that has absolutely no effect on an individual's ability to use marijuana medicinally and recreationally in their own home.
That is correct, Commissioner Louie.
This is, all we're doing is talking about the commercial use of it, and people who've come out and are ill and need marijuana for a legitimate medical purpose can still possess it, they can grow it, they can use it in their own home, and that's not going to affect them at all, correct? Or I just want you to comment on that so that the public.
That is correct. Commissioner Louie, thank you for clarifying that. The Proposition 64 went into effect immediately for that portion of the recreational, which is that they can grow 6 plants and they can use it in their home. It is true that they cannot use it in public, and it is not technically for sale. Recreational adult use is technically not for sale yet. There's no place you're supposed to be able to buy it right now. Medicinal is, and nothing that we do or the Board of Supervisors does will change Proposition 64. And so, as you know, many people have said that we are legalizing cannabis. The state of California's voters legalized cannabis. What we are doing is land use.
Thank you.
Ms. Bull?
Just a question of clarification again, regarding the money available potentially from the state. Can you explain a little bit about sort of those buckets of money and how the county can or will or will not be able to access those funds?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Poole, and for the benefit of the commission, on page 14, these mandated breakdowns were in Proposition 64. They are now in the Cannabis Tax Revenue and Taxation Code, Part 14.5 of the California Code, that allocates administration for 60%, youth-related 20%, environmental-related, and 20% local government and the California Highway Patrol. So, for example, based on the $1 billion a year, which is a low estimate, there would be $185 million for marijuana safety programs. These are programs where we could get a grant for the fire department. We could get a grant for, if we had some reason, we could get a grant for additional law enforcement. Public health could get grants. However, it is written into the code that if you are a county that bans any portion of commercial or retail, for example, if we permitted cultivation but banned retail, we still could not get any of that enforcement or public safety money. And so that is one of the concerns under option A, which is the general fund is $19 million in deficit. And so it is not clear where any funding would come from for law enforcement or this cannabis activity. I would note, I would like to address, since we brought up the revenue code, there is also money for the California Highway Patrol, as well as money for, right now it's a study at Stanford and in San Diego, to establish a saliva test for THC. That study has been going on for a year, and it was directed by the legislature a year ago to start working on it, such that the California Highway Patrol could have, and law enforcement could have, an immediate test, the way we have breathalyzers, and that a limit for THC would be established on what it means to be driving under the influence. As a reminder, of course, it was still illegal to use it in your car, to have an open container of cannabis, whether medicinal or otherwise, and driving under the influence. None of that was changed by Proposition 64.
Comments?
I
Who would like to start?
I had one quick more question for staff, if that's okay.
Okay.
Chairman. Director Oviatt, I noticed that under the option B, which is to allow cannabis's commercial use and to regulate it, that money, $1 million, is being set aside for a community benefit fund for drug education to support children, teens, and young adults up to the age of 20. Now, is that in there because everyone agrees that there's a significant risk to children, teens, and young adults? A risk that warrants setting aside $1 million?
Commissioner Louie, there is not enough funding from the state and federal government for drug education now. The planning department administers the community development money that we get from the federal government for HUD, and this small amount of money is given to a variety of community groups that do outreach to the homeless or do these kinds of programs. There is not enough money now, and we have an opiate, methamphetamine, and other sorts of issues. Proposition 64 now legalized something, but provided no additional real funding. There is funding in the state legislature for that additional funding. However, it is unclear whether that will make it all the way down to grassroots groups. The amount of money in the Prop 64, it talks about kind of like a state kind of education efforts. And so we said, yes, there is an education component that needs to be done now that this is legal, because they've been, it's actually been kind of, is it medicinal and what is it for? And so that is a risk for youth. And so, but the point is that the state created this risk, not the land use. That you've asked, and so that is my representation here. And so the question then becomes, where is the source of money? The general fund doesn't have it. The public health doesn't have any more grants. So that was how that was developed. It was developed based on, a source of community benefit. Many other jurisdictions have negotiated individual community benefit agreements with individual cannabis operators. As you know, since you have sat on this commission and seen the way we interact with industries, our Kern County model is an across-the-board equal playing field rather than individual cannabis operators coming forward and saying, I'll donate to this or I'll donate to that. So that was how it's developed.
Thank you.
Seems we have two options before us. I don't know if it'd be appropriate or not, but I would like to pool the commission and ask, I'll just ask one question. Are you in favor of option A with a yes or no answer? To give us an idea where this commission stands, because we only have 4 of us. Would that be okay with the commission? Ms. Poole?
Your question, am I?
Are you in favor of option A?
No.
Mr. Louie?
Yes.
No. Okay.
Do we have to ask you now?
I'm gonna hold out. Okay, does anybody have comments before we take a vote?
Sure. Comments, okay. First, I'd like to disclose that I spoke and received messages from many of you and many folks that have similar comments that you've all made. And so I'd also like to thank you all for being here and spending your time. This is an incredibly important issue for our community and for our county. I think from my perspective, I sit here as a planning commissioner. I sit here making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors with regard to land use policy in this county. I'm not sitting here deciding the benefits or the potential drawbacks of recreational or medicinal cannabis use. I have personal opinions on those things, but those do not impact my decision today as looking at the land use policy of this county. This comment's been made before, but I think it's important because it impacts my recommendation today. It's what we do today as planning commissioners, and eventually what the Board of Supervisors do with regard to this proposed ordinance, doesn't change what the state of California did last year with regard to Prop 64. So with regard to land use, because that's the hat I have on today, I think what the county has proposed is reasonable. I think that what the county is proposing appropriately mitigates for the potential environmental impacts associated with regulation in this way. And so I'm also concerned about the implications of a ban and the ability of our code enforcement, our local law enforcement, to enforce a ban in this county. We sit here and listen to lots of folks that are very concerned when county ordinances and policies are not properly enforced. Code enforcement, law enforcement, they're stretched thin, and I have serious concerns about the impacts, not only fiscal impacts, but other impacts associated with the implementation of a ban. And so because of that, I won't make a motion now, but I appreciate all of staff's hard work on this, and I think what staff has proposed in option B is reasonable, and so that's where I am tonight. You don't clap. Thank you.
Mr. Louie, do you have any comments?
Sure. I would disclose that I also met with a couple of members from the public before tonight's meeting, and I also received several phone calls about this issue. I think that as a planning commissioner, our absolute primary concern is the public health, safety, and welfare. That's one of the findings that the planning department's asking us to make. One of the findings they're asking us to make is that regulation of all medical and adult use cannabis-related activities and the actions will protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And so, for me, this is a matter of public health, safety, and welfare. And what group of people should be at our primary consideration when we think about that. And that group of people has to be children, teens, and young adults. And so my next question, after figuring out that we need to protect the health, safety, and welfare of this group of youth, which is the most important in my mind, the next question for me is, what is the nature of cannabis? What is its nature? And we are not allowed, the law doesn't allow us commissioners to independently go out and do our own research. So what we're left with is testimony from the public, you guys who came out, and thank you for coming out. This is a big decision for all of us, and we thank and appreciate your input. But what we're left with, or what I'm left with in determining what is the nature of cannabis, is to listen to the testimony of you guys. But to also look at what was provided to us in the staff report. And in the staff report notes that cannabis is a federal Schedule I substance. The Controlled Substance Act created scheduled drugs into 5 categories based on medical use, addictiveness, and abuse potential. Requirements for classification as a Schedule I drug are high potential for abuse, no medical use and treatment, and no ability to be used or tested safely, even under medical supervision. Schedule I drugs include, with cannabis, heroin, ecstasy, LSD, peyote, and quaaludes. Schedule II drugs, which are considered less dangerous than those Schedule I drugs, cannabis, include cocaine, meth, and oxycodone. I haven't, look, you guys, look, people can laugh and people can say what they want. I'm telling you what I am relying on and what's in the staff report. Now, I also listened to testimony from the public. And what I heard from the public, from our director of mental health, the director of mental health department, who has experience, I'm assuming, and is in a good position to see how drug abuse plays itself out, says that there are harmful effects on our youth, that category of people who we need to be the most concerned with. She says that the mental health department is against allowing its commercial use, but could do a prevention plan. So even the director for mental health believes that if we do allow this, we need to have a prevention plan. We heard from a pastor who talked about all the health risks, a RN, talked about the health risks to, again, our youth, property crimes. There was even one gentleman who's in favor of the B option, which is to allow its commercial use and to regulate. He indicated there are 55 advantages to marijuana, cannabis, and there are 13 cons. But he indicated that those 13 cons all relate to children. And again, our youth is of my primary concern. And so when I balance the nature of cannabis with what I think our overriding job to do is protect the public health and safety, when I balance that with what we get, and the benefit is what? It's money. We want to get more tax dollars where we can have more money to the general fund and use that money to then go after these the lawless industry that exists now. In my view, there are, what we spend our money on today, whether to go after this lawless industry, is a question for elected officials who get to decide what priorities they want to attack. I think if we gave money to the sheriff and said, Sheriff Youngblood, we're giving you a pot of money, I don't think we can tell him how to spend that money. I think he has the right to decide how that's done. And so weighing the health public safety issues with what we would be benefiting it, what benefits we would be receiving, I cannot support option B, and I am a proponent in favor of option A.
Thank you.
Chairman Babcock, could I have just one moment? I just want to clarify, the person who spoke is not the director of the Kern County Behavioral Health. They are a representative of a contractor who provides services to the county and the county employees.
Okay.
So I just want to be clear that that wasn't the Kern County Department of Behavioral Recovery that spoke.
Okay.
They were very important points, and the points are still well taken, but for the record, I just wanted to clarify that.
I will.
Okay.
I will. I would, and as a follow-up, thank you for correcting me on that. But what also played into my decision was not only her opinions on the effects of cannabis as it relates to health, public health, safety, and welfare, but also the chief of police, the acting chief of police for Ridgecrest, as well as the representative from the Kern County Sheriff's Department. That played in as well. Thank you.
Ms. Garcia?
And speaking after my two colleagues, I would agree that I carry the same tasks as they both described. I'm charged with overseeing zoning and regulation, and at the same time, I have to do that with health, safety, and the welfare of our county in mind. But in thinking about the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Kern County, I have to ask if the correlation can be made between commercial marijuana in Kern County and minors using marijuana. Because the fact of the matter is, Prop 64 passed. Marijuana is currently legal here. Trying to say that whether or not we have regulation and we have legalized shops in Kern County and saying that that somehow correlates to minors using marijuana is like saying because we have bars in Kern County, now we have minor children who are drinking alcohol. You just I can't make that connection. Where I come from with this issue, my position is that given that Prop 64 is passed, and I understand that this is a touchy issue because marijuana has been a controlled substance for so long, and it's still going through a process. When we attach terms like, crime and criminal activity to marijuana, we can only attach it because marijuana traditionally has been illegal. It's going to go through a decriminalization process, which began with the passage of Prop 64. If you don't like marijuana and you're against it, I'm sorry. We may be a conservative county, but we are part of the state of California. So then I have to turn to a look at where we are as a county. And where we are as a county is we come here into these chambers and we talk about our budget and we're making huge cuts. We're making huge cuts to a general fund with no new market coming in. Our markets in this county are oil and ag. And the fact of the matter is, oil is never going to resurge. We are on a downward trend with oil, and we've already seen it with the loss of jobs. Those jobs are not going to spike again. So choosing to stay conservative means saying no to a market that is guaranteed to provide jobs for people in Kern County. And we heard today, jobs that pay livable wages. The energy that's coming into Kern County now with solar, with wind, these are good industries, but they're not industries that provide the mass amount of jobs that the oil industry provided us. The marijuana industry has the potential to bring thousands of jobs. We can't deny that. And choosing to just stay in the dark and not choose regulation just means that we're going to allow all of our neighboring counties to benefit from Prop 64. And because we have a personal problem with marijuana and want to choose to believe that it's better for it to stay illegal because we don't like Prop 64, is not fiscally in the best interest of this county. Not only is it not fiscally in the best interest of this county because we need to see our economy grow so that we can grow that general fund, choosing not to regulate means we need to find a different way to raise money because we're going to have to pay not to play. Director Oviatt told us, we're going to have to pay millions not to play. We're not going to have a stake in that billion-dollar pie that's raised throughout the state. I don't want to see money flowing down I-5 through Kern County going everywhere else but here, because that's what will happen when the marijuana industry develops as Prop 64 continues to roll out. I've done my research. I've looked at the statistics. I understand where Commissioner Louie made his questions to law enforcement about the DUI issue, about testing. I understand the difficulties that come with that. I deal with that as an attorney, and I've had Kern County, the toxicologist for national toxicology, on the stand questioning him about testing people under the influence of marijuana. And the testing's almost there, like Director Oviatt said, to do that. They're ready to roll it out. This is a question of whether or not we want to move along with the state and be progressive, or we want to stay in the dark and we want to continue to suffer financially. I have to do what's in the best interest of this county. And the best interest of this county is surely not denying us of jobs, denying us of income that we desperately need for things like education, for things like drug education, which includes drug education for things like the opioid epidemic. And it surely isn't depriving people like you, ma'am, who suffer from cancer, placing barriers on your access to medicine that you desperately need and forcing you to go out of the county. There has to be a process of destigmatization, and there has to be a process by which we can benefit the way every other county will benefit. This is our chance. If we don't do this, we're going to spend millions fighting this out in court until eventually, years down the line, we'll join civilization. This is why I support regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Okay, I guess everybody wants to know what's on my mind. First off, I do agree with Ms. Poole's comments. Try to save some time here. This is a land use matter. I do agree with Ms. Garcia. And actually, I do agree with Mr. Louie about health, safety, and welfare. But I think regulation is the best way to protect health, safety, and welfare. I'm sorry, option B is the best way to protect health, safety, and welfare. I misspoke there. Because it's regulated. If it goes unregulated, these fine sheriffs are still going to have the same problems they have now, and it's just going to grow. But if we have regulation, there's rules, laws, and monies coming in to help them in many ways. I feel bad for the Sheriff's Department with the cuts they've had. And I think this, by going with option B, will actually protect the community. I think it'll give a better chance to keep the drugs away from the kids, as Mr. Louie indicated he was worried about. So given that, and given that we are charged tonight because we have one chairman that had a conflict on this item, we must make a decision tonight. We have no choice.
Chairman
So-
Babcock, if I may help facilitate this discussion,
I was
if I
just-
may read the recommendation, since it is a little more detailed than just
Okay.
the
well,
shorthand option B.
I just wanted to say I'm in favor of option B, and then why don't you read what the motion should be, and then someone can make a motion.
The recommendation is advise the Planning Commission to recommend to the Board of Supervisors to, 1, certify the environmental impact report, adopt Section 15091 findings of fact for option B, regulate, and Section 15093 statements of overriding considerations for option B, regulate, adopt mitigation measure monitoring and reporting program for option B, regulate, Repeal Chapter 19.120 Medical Marijuana Dispensaries, Chapter 5.84 Medical Marijuana Cooperatives and Collectives, Chapter 5.85 Medical Marijuana Cultivation, Chapter 5.86 Moratorium on New Medical Marijuana Dispensaries, adopt amendments to Title 12 Parks, Recreation Areas, and Public Places, adopt amendments to Title 19 Kern County Zoning Ordinance for the following changes, adopt Chapter 19.120 Cannabis Land Use Ordinance, adopt amendments to Chapters 19.12 Exclusive Agricultural District, Chapter 19.14 Limited Agricultural District, Chapter 19.28 Commercial Office District, Chapter 19.38 Neighborhood Commercial District, Chapter 19.32 General Commercial District, Chapter 19.34 Highway Commercial District, Chapter 19.36 Light Industrial District, Chapter 19.38 Medium Industrial District, Chapter 19.40 Heavy Industrial District, Chapter 19.46 Natural Resources District, Chapter 19.82 Off-Street Parking, Chapter 19.114 Enforcement and Penalties is recommended by staff. Adopt amendment to the Agricultural Preserve Standard Uniform Rules. Recommend the Board of Supervisors place a cannabis business tax on the ballot and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the attached draft resolution.
Do I have a motion?
I move to approve as recommended by staff.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
3 ayes, 1 no, 1 absent. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank
Chairman-
you all for coming out this evening. I'd like to say it's been a great 23 years.
Chairman
And,
Babcock, if I may, this matter will be sent out for a public notice for the October 24th Board of Supervisors. It will be on the morning agenda starting at 9 o'clock.
Next is item H, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.